it sounds like there's not a lot of realism coming from the Trent Williams side.
And that's sort of the issue, is the reality of the situation is it's hard to find teams that are willing, unless you're talking about a top of the league player, which Trent has been at times, who's still young, who you can build around. It's very difficult to find teams that are willing to give up both top draft capital and a top contract for a guy. It's happened a couple times. Look at D Ford last year, right? Now, that was a second-round pick that was involved in that trade for a guy who had double-digit sacks the year before. And the reason the Chiefs could only get a second-round pick for him is because the Niners also had to do a contract with him. Frank Clark was a little different, where they did give up a 1 and a 2 in a contract. But those sorts of things are really, really rare. And so, if Trent Williams' priority is getting out of D.C., then he has to be flexible, on the contract end of it. And that part of it is what scares teams off. Same sort of thing was at play in the DeAndre Hopkins deal, why the Texans weren't able to get value. And I can certainly understand Ron Rivera and Kyle Smith and all the guys that are running the Redskins right now looking at it saying, look, dude, we're happy to, explore trades, but we're not going to give you away. And if you want to go somewhere else, that's fine, but you have to work with us here, and you have to do a reasonable contract with somebody else. And I'm just telling you guys, he wants to be the highest paid tackle in football, and I think he's probably come off of this a little bit. But I know one of the issues with the Redskins was last year, before things really went off the rails, he was asking for quarterback money, and that is just, If the player in this situation, if Trent Williams in this situation is being realistic about it, and he really wants to get out of DC, there's a path to doing it. But the financial ask on his end is just, I think, way beyond where the Redskins would be able to move him for any sort of return where they would feel good about saying, okay, we'll go ahead and do this.
Albert, how can a guy like Trent, with his injury history, let alone the cancer that he had removed from his head, or a guy like Cam Newton for that matter, even get a new home and sign a new contract without being able to take a physical? What happened? I thought Todd Gurley would be available forever. Was he able to do a physical with Atlanta, or did they sign him sight unseen?
Well, they signed both. The deal that Gurley got in Atlanta was very much a prove-it deal. And remember, the Rams were already paying a part of his freight because
good point, yeah,
because there was guaranteed money in his contract, and he had about $7.5 million left over from the Rams. So that one was a little easier because the financial risk wasn't as huge. With someone like Cam, I think Clowney's in this category too. It's really difficult because it's one thing if a guy's been relatively healthy. And teams are sharing, medical information and everything else now to try to help each other out. That's happening. It's one thing if it's a completely healthy guy where it's okay, there's this or this or this to deal with. For example, DeForest Buckner was traded from the Niners to the Colts. Well, he had a little bit of a sternum issue a couple of years ago. So the Niners were very helpful in sharing his medical files with the Colts to kind of expedite the trade. That sort of stuff's happening. It's something else when a guy has something that's been debilitating or could be a problem going forward. So, if you look at someone like Cam, it's the left foot, and foot injuries, specifically Liz Frank injuries, tend to linger. And he's got a right shoulder, and he's got a right shoulder problem. He's had multiple procedures on his right shoulder. And so, for a quarterback, that's really tough. So I think for those sorts of guys, for Clowney, for Cam Newton, who've had significant injury history, Trent would fall into that group. Yeah, it is a lot more difficult right now because team doctors can't get their hands on guys from other teams.
Albert, thank you, buddy. Always appreciate the time, man, and stay safe out there, dude.
Anytime, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe.
We'll see you, bud.
You got it. Albert Breer on Grant and Danny. He mentions Cam Newton there at the end of the discussion. He's one of 3 credentialed veteran quarterbacks who are available. If you had to take a flyer on one to have a strong second act in their career, Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, who would it be? You're listening to The Fan.